Hello and welcome back to the Nasty Metal Production channel here at YouTube, and welcome to another album of the week. This is episode number 124, and today's album pick goes to possibly one of my actually it is one of my favorite thrash metal albums that come out within the 2010s. And since yesterday it has reached its 10th anniversary, I am talking about the debut album from Swedish crossover / thrash metal band Dr. Living Dead with their self-titled debut album, which was originally released on August 15th through, of course, High Roller Records. Then, of course, released here in the States through Tribunal Records, which has been the company that Dive Bomb has been working with for years. But they released in the States at least the following year on at least February 7th of 2012. But obviously, the High Roller Records releases its original, and oh my god. Where to really begin with at least Dr. Living Dead? Again, I discovered these guys actually all the way back in 2009, already when they had their first two demos released. Again, Thrashing After Death and of course Thrashing the Law, which of course Thrashing the Law was still the most recent thing they had released. But that's how I discovered these guys. And in 2010, I actually ended up downloading at least both their two demos because of, I don't know, whenever, how it would be possible to be able to actually find any physical copies of their first two demos. I kind of wish the band would, since they are with Century Media, I wish they would at least reissue those first two demos. That they would fit onto one disc. So, I hope soon. But that's how I did. I downloaded those two and I pretty much just fell in love. Then, of course, a year later when I just found out that they had released a debut album, my god, I had to figure out where would be a site where I can actually purchase some of these. Because, at the time, as far as within the household, it wasn't very easy to find at least, within at least, I guess, ordering form on where to actually get a hold of a copy of their debut album. Eventually, a year later, right around my birthday time, at least after my birthday a bit, when I had gotten money, I obviously used that to actually buy a bunch of stuff that High Roller Records had released off of Amazon. And this was definitely one of the albums I wanted to really purchase. And oh my god, when it finally arrived, I could not stop playing this album. I could not stop playing it. So without further ado, since I already kind of gave you my sort of backstory behind at least this band, let me just get into at least the album itself here. Let's definitely get into at least some of the history just leading into this album. Again, they are based out of Stockholm, Sweden. And of course, again, I just mentioned they released two demos. But I think there was slightly different members at least. At least they had a guy named by the name of Dr. Dr. Ape, who at one point was the drummer for at least from 2007 to 2008 before taking over vocal duties from, or at least took over sole vocal duties, and to beginning, I guess, in 2008 then, or 2000 or whatnot. But he was a former member, and had pretty much at least actually was a part of the band at least until after their second album. But there we go. There's my half-assed detailing of at least Dr. Ape and Dr. Living Dead. Apologize for that. And of course, I guess the actual drummer here, again, who obviously replaced Dr. Ape on drums, because since Dr. Ape obviously took over vocal duties from 2008 and onwards, up until 2013, would be Dr. New Drummer, who only lasted at least until 2009, and of course then finally getting Dr. Dawn, who would then replace Dr. New Drummer in 2010, and basically he remained in the band until after their second album. So there we go. There's your little detailed history of at least there. So the lineup basically leading into this album right here, into their self-titled debut, pretty much is the lineup of Dr. Toxic, Dr. Dawn, Dr. Ape, and Dr. Rad. So there's your lineup going into the, again, they all have gimmicks, basically. They all dress up basically in a regular, almost like Suicidal Tendency style street clothing, but wearing skull masks. So they kind of almost did what Ghost was doing, but I think they've kept their identities much more. They've been much more, at least, protective of their facial identities than at least the idiots, I guess you can say, and fucking Ghost did. Whatever. I don't care how, what are my personal thoughts on Ghost. I don't care. So yeah, in many ways, still, Ghosts are fucking idiots. They've at least, these guys, at least in Dr. Living Dead, again, are from Sweden, same country as Ghost. Obviously, have better kept their identities, a lot better. Their identities have been more protective. There we go. But there's your lineup, basically leading into the self-titled album, which the recording process would be taking place, at least in 2010, at, I'm obviously reading off the back of my CD case here, off the CD case, again, at the, recorded and mixed, at the Gutter View Recorders in 2010, by, of course, mixed and recorded by Fred Etzby at Gutter View Recordings, or Recorders in 2010, which I believe might have been the same studio that Bullet recorded Full Pool. So there we go, and so that's obviously should give you at least a good idea of where it was recorded at, again in 2010, and of course being produced by Fred Etzby and of course Dr. Living Dead themselves. So it's both semi self-produced, but also professionally produced as well by Fred Etzby. So there you go. And again, recorded in 2010, and of course it gets mixed down and all mastered and ready for at least release by High Roller Records on August 15th of this year, of 2011 actually, of 2011. So there we go. I said this year because I'm so stuck on doing reviews and whatnot of recent stuff. So that was an accidental slip up. But I apologize. Either way, I'm done giving out all the information for this album. So let's definitely get into, of course, the actual songs for this album. So what we have here is about 16 songs, and it clocks in around 36 minutes and 42 seconds. Because it can't be a crossover thrash metal album without its song for as long, at least, just its overall ridiculous number of songs, and of course its time length, because that's what you expect from a lot of the classic crossover thrash metal bands like Nuclear Assault, or maybe Stormtroopers of Death, you know, or MOD, those kind of bands. You know, they definitely always pack their stuff. DRI is another one. You know, they always pack their fucking albums with as plenty of fucking songs as possible. So that they're obviously keeping tradition to that. So here's your 16 songs though. Because it all begins with World War IX, Slime from Above, Revenge on John, Streets of Dogtown, Kindergarten Cop, Kill Me, Dead End Life, My Brain is for Sale, the title track, or at least the song that's named after the band, Hard Target, Feeding the Psycho, You're Not the Law, Chucky, Gremlins Night, UFO Attack, and then finally ending with Reptiles Beneath. So there's your 16 songs. And whatever that they were obviously accomplishing with their first two albums, everything on here is just basically those, but more perfected. Everything about this album is what their first two demos were giving you a taste of, and everything is just full blown here. It's just, everything's completely realized, and of course it's so youthful sounding. This right here would have fit in on Combat Records back in 1987. This is just that kind of sound. Everything is that sort of street level thrash metal with that sort of hardcore punk aesthetic going on to it. It still has that, it just sounds like classic 1987 thrash metal. And then of course you got, as far as comparisons, I mean, the way I can describe as far as musically is if Mike Muir of Suicidal Tendencies decided to basically front a very Anthrax or Nuclear Assault style band. Because if you got those almost very Nuclear Assault, Anthrax, just rapid fire kind of riffage. At times a little bit similar to Slayer here and there. You might find some of that. There's a little bit of that just for extra aggression. But it's got those fiery fucking riffs that you really, I don't think Suicidal Tendencies were really that much known for. I mean, yes, they had their, they were just more skate punk like. These really just sound like classic thrash that I think that bands like Anthrax and, for example, in Nuclear Assault, the sort of almost New York based Jersey thrash sound right here. It's just, but with, of course, Mike Muir's vocals, his sort of, again, the Suicidal Tendencies, almost LA punk feel going on. All of that, just all combined, and it actually just creates a really just fun, energetic, just straight up kick in the ass kind of overall attitude. Just works. But as far as the lyrical contents, if they hadn't established it from the demos, then they established it here, because of everything is really inspired by like 80s movies, whether it be horror movies and action movies, and of course just overall thrash metal and death worship and whatnot. But you really get a lot of the sort of very, even at times, science fiction stuff too, but everything is all inspired by even though they say 80s movies. I think Metal Archives, obviously they state 80s movies as lyrical themes, but when you have a song like Hard Target and of course Revenge on John, which the song Revenge on John is obviously inspired from at least the Bruce Willis film and Samuel Jackson film Die Hard with a Vengeance. It's very much inspired by that film, which came out in 1995, the year that I was born. So, and I think same thing goes for Hard Target as well, which was a 90s Jean-Claude Van Damme film, which of course featured Lance Henriksen as the villain in the film, and Arnold Vosloo as also the side villain in it, which again, good film. I love that. It's just straight up 90s fucking action stuff that you expect from like John Woo, the director. But it's all, though, again, you almost can mistaken some of that, I guess, for 80s kind of lyrics, because again, Jean-Claude Van Damme and Bruce Willis, both, again, the original Die Hard, and of course some of the, like, the blood sports and the fucking some of the karate kind of, or martial arts films, and even goddamn, plenty, just typical of that kind of period. So you get plenty of that. And so I can see why that would be mistaken for 80s films, but they obviously do great on taking those lyrical contents of those two movies and just providing them into just straight up, just no frills, just fun, absolutely bonkers fucking thrash metal tracks, which works. So there we go. It's all great, but you got other sort of lyrical themes here as far as other films. I think I might have stated this when I did my top, was it 10, 15 or so favorite thrash metal albums to come out within the 2010s. This album was obviously really, I think I remember being high on the list, which I did last year, really early, at least January of last year, that I did that list before the whole pandemic fucking hit. Either way, I obviously went through some of the lyrical contents, but I can go through here, because since some of these are also recordings too, because I can go, let me pull up the pages for at least both the first two demos, so I can run through at least what are some of the songs that obviously made it from the first two demos onto this album, basically. Obviously World War IX, I think Die Hard 3 then became Revenge on John here. Yep, it did. UFO Attack and Chucky. All these four songs obviously were lifted from the very first demo, Thrash After Death, which was released in 2007, and it obviously got lifted and made it on to, of course, the debut album. Now, as far as the songs I can pick out from at least their second and final demo before their debut album, Thrashing the Law, I can hear, which came out in 2008, I can run through at least the songs on here that made it on to, of course, the debut album. And it seems like we have it, well, same number, 4 songs on here. You're Not the Law, which is obviously inspired by when Sylvester Stallone played Judge Dredd for the 1995 film. Gremlins Night, which I think it's obviously inspired maybe by the first Gremlins, or it could have been the second Gremlins. But I will definitely want to say the first Gremlins. Of course, Kindergarten Cop, it's self-explanatory. You know what it's also about. It's about the Arnold Schwarzenegger film. There you go. And of course, Dark the Living Dead, song about them. So those are the 4 songs that made it on to this album. But we still got plenty of other, you know, again, Chucky's self-explanatory. You know who it's about. But I can go again. Hard Target I ran through. It's about the film Hard Target. There's a few other songs I have no clue. I think Feeding the Psycho could be paying homage to maybe Mike Muir and Suicidal Tendencies, because the way it's spelled. Because Psycho is being spelled as C-Y-C-O. Which isn't that, I believe that's how they all spelled it in Suicidal Tendencies. So I think that might be a just my hunch, my theory, that it's all at least made as a way to pay tribute to, of course, to one of their biggest influence, obviously. So there we go. UFO Attack. Well, again, it's all about sci-fi films, or just anything that involved fucking aliens and UFOs. You know, My Brain Is for Sale. I don't know if that could be. I don't know where that could be inspired by. I know I've seen plenty of horror movies that might contain a plot line where somebody obviously sells brains for sale, but that could almost be something that could have been lifted from maybe an old Tales from the Crypt comic book, for all we know, or anything that was on that same comic book company that published. You know, like the Tales from the Crypt, or even stuff like the Vault of Horror. That definitely sounds like something that would be in the line of that. But there's just so many just great sort of fucking stuff here. I mean, I just love the sound from beginning to end. As far as the type playing, I love the recording. It sounds like, again, the 1980s. It's got that classic thrash metal sound. Everything is just. If everything is obviously close to a T in terms of really recreating that sort of period and its attitude, aesthetic, everything just comes into full force. There's just not a really bad song on here. Everything is just fun. I basically can listen to this album almost all day. That's the way I feel about this one. Everything just oozes with at least charisma. It's all just meant to be fun. It's not to be taken to be overly seriously, but it just has an overall heaviness. It just sounds like they're just having a ball when they're obviously recording this one, which is always what you want to hear when you're listening, or at least when you put on an album. You want to expect the band to be just as much having fun, you know, basically performing those songs than it is for you listening to that. And I think that aesthetic really just it oozes off on this album. Basically, this is great stuff. I just love this album from beginning to end. There's nothing bad on here. Again, as far as personal favorites, I love Kill Me. It's just such a goddamn blast to listen to. Of course, the song Dark the Living Dead's great. Hard Target, Slime from Above, Revenge on John. And again, it's not very long either. I mean, it's like, what, 2 minutes and 4 seconds? But fuck it, it's still a blast to listen to. I mean, that's the thing, the time length. Because of how many songs they chose for this album, being 16 songs, not every song is fucking long. Each song doesn't even break past the fucking 2-minute mark or 3 minute. It doesn't make it to 3 minutes, actually. Most of the songs don't. The only song that really is the longest song is the final track, which is Reptiles Beneath, which might be close to a little over 3 minutes. But they tack at the end with sort of really sort of almost very synth, almost moog, I guess you could say, very sound effects, which give it that sort of, you know, science fiction feel, because it's Reptiles Beneath. So they pick the right kind of mood and atmosphere to pick before, after, you know, kind of play after the song, and as it fades out, you hear it. It works like for a 1980s science fiction horror movie, just great in that way. But at least it lengthens the song to at least 4 minutes and 6 seconds. So it's definitely the longest song on the album. But each song, though, depending on, it doesn't even matter how long they're all fucking fun to listen to. Just all great tracks, so I can't really complain there. Everything is just classic. To me, I know, so basically this pretty much ends my entire thoughts on this album anyways, because after this, this was actually the only and last fucking Dr. Living Dead album that I actually had bought, or at least I had ended up owning. A year later, they released a second album, which was titled Radioactive Intervention, which was their final album to be released on High Roller Records, before they obviously got signed with Century Media Records. But Radioactive Intervention was the second album, and I never got around to getting it. And sooner or later, I'll have to get at least that album, and of course, the follow to the next two albums. The albums where they, obviously, that are signed with Century Media Records, you know, like for example, Crush the Sublime Gods, which was released in 2015, and of course Cosmic Conqueror, which was released in 2017, and that's been their last album since. But still, I hope, still at some point I'm gonna have to obviously acquire those two albums, those three, and just listen to them and see how they've, I guess you say maybe matured or changed over the years. But still, I think that the reason I've also didn't get the second album is because of, I don't know how the hell you could top such a youthful, such a fun album as this one. It just seemed like this was one of those I just loved to death, and I don't know how the other three were going, especially the second album. I don't know how it was going to be in terms of comparison to this album, because I just love the fucking debut album so much that it probably was a little bit hard for me to actually almost to even fathom how they could even top it. So there we go. Those are just my overall thoughts and honest opinions there. But it's just a favorite album of mine. I really love this album to death. It is easily one of my favorite thrash metal albums that come out within the 2010s. And it still is one of my favorite thrash metal albums that come out within the past 10 years. This is goddamn oozes with just joy and just fun and energetic. It's just nothing. They don't bullshit around with what they do. It's just no frills, but everything is just goddamn enjoyable, and I just love it. So there we go. There it is. There is my overall thoughts on, of course, the debut self-titled album from Dr. Living Dead. Again, originally released on August 15th of 2011, and since then, it has reached its 10th anniversary now, since yesterday. And if you were there, obviously, 10 years ago, and you obviously are familiar with Dr. Living Dead, and you actually have bought this album, just like me, when it at least came out, or at least when it was still pretty relatively new. Again, if you have any thoughts on whether there be at least positive or negative, again, depending on when you first heard it or when you ended up listening to it, again, you can leave those thoughts in the comments section below. But if you haven't listened to this album and you're really kind of curious about certain modern crossover / thrash metal bands, I think that this is a very solid debut album, or at least it's a solid modern album to really check out. I mean, the self-titled Mr. Bungle, or was it just the Mr. Bungle album from last year? I think is kind of very much close to being very crossover in its own overall, in its own personal way. That's a very good album too. I mean, both these two. If you want to really listen to some albums that really sound like they could have been released on like Combat Records back in the day, which was obviously arguably probably one of the best American thrash metal, or just some best American metal labels that come out within the 1980s. They were just a great fucking label and had some great stuff released on it. So if you want albums that really kind of sound like that they would have been released on that label, this album or the Mr. Bungle album are obviously one of those that really come to mind to me. Even Vulture's second album, Ghastly Waves and Battered Graves, really sound like albums that could have been on like Combat Records. But this debut album from Dark Living Dead is in that sort of same category, and it's a fun album to listen to. So if you want something that really sounds like that, it really captures the spirit of that period of 1987 on like Combat Records, this is I don't think that you'll do yourself no wrong checking this album out. It's worth checking out. I recommend it. So there we go. There it is. Hope all of you enjoyed. This is Heavy Thrasher saying I'm out, and I'll see you all later. Take care, everyone.